Hi, everyone. Happy Boxing Day. I hope everybody's doing well. Welcome to Resistance Live. It is the 26th of December, 2023. I'm wondering how much I'm going to have to talk about this week, honestly. Oh, I've got like fuzz on my shirt. Sorry, guys. And I'm on the wrong camera. Hang on here one second. Let me just get myself loaded here. That's way better. Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry. I don't know what happened there. We had a technical glitch. Nice to see you all. I hope everybody had a good holiday, regardless of which holidays you observe. Joyful Kwanzaa to those of you observing. I hope everyone is having a great little bit of a break here. And I'm wondering about how much we're going to have to actually talk about this week because the news has been kind of slow so far. I am about to jinx myself by saying that. I'm 100% sure. But in any event, I am grateful for all of you. I'm going to remind everyone I have no control over the ads that YouTube sticks on our channel. And if there's anything showing up there that you don't like, I've blocked as many things as I possibly can, including political ads, because sometimes it ends up being a little bit more conservative than our usual audience bent. Okay, so just to start things off, I am coming to you as always from occupied Tongva land. Today I'm wearing a black cashmere sweater with a boat neck. My hair is down with my new cropped cut. I am wearing my thick gold hoop earrings. And I am in my office as always. My kids are off school, not surprisingly. So if you hear anything that sounds like a herd of elephants above my head, that's what it is. And I'm glad you're all here. All right. So we're going to talk about what happened Friday now with the Supreme Court denying the leapfrogged request for review by Jack Smith. And I want everybody to just be aware that in a certain way, I was not surprised by this once the DC Circuit set their briefing schedule. So I'm going to remind everybody that this case was already on appeal. This is the presidential immunity part of the case. And it was already on appeal to the DC Circuit before Jack Smith asked the Supreme Court to review it through a writ of certiorari. In the interim time, the DC Circuit set an oral argument date on their appeal on the 9th of January. So for the Supreme Court to have taken the case would have been a little bit surprising. It was a novel effort on Jack Smith's part. Everybody kind of knew about this. So I don't think that there's really anything that anyone should be shocked about here, that basically the Supreme Court was like, nope, wait. Now, I have to remind everybody that it's not going to be a very long wait, because the DC Circuit has been moving extremely quickly on this part of the appeal. Again, we talked about this last week. We talked about this the week before. The way in which the DC Circuit has been scheduling this is designed to get to a resolution as quickly as possible. So we're going to have an oral argument on the 9th, and I would expect that we're going to have a ruling within a few days of that. That ruling will whatever way it goes, will doubtless result in another writ of certiorari to the Supreme Court on the exact same issue. So the question then becomes, how quickly is the Supreme Court likely to take it up, if they take it up? And I have to remind everybody that even in the absolute worst case scenario where the Supreme Court takes it up, we'll have a ruling on that by June at the absolute latest. So again, I have to remind you all, I know a lot of people are worried right now about Judge Chutkan's trial date, which is still holding fast at March 4th. We could have a ruling way in advance of that. I'm just going to point that out also. The Supreme Court can move very quickly when it wants to. Reminder that in death penalty appeals cases, they can rule on things in a matter of hours. So we'll have to see what happens next on this front. But the other thing that they could do is, if the DC Circuit rules in favor of Jack Smith's team, in favor of the prosecution, they could just allow it to stand. So we're going to have to see how all of this works going forward. But I don't want anybody to panic. And, that's kind of a theme right now here. I know there are a number of other legal commentators who are like, see, SCOTUS screwed us. I just want to point out that there is the likelihood that this case will be back in front of the Supreme Court before the end of January. And so no one should kind of get nervous about this. To answer your question, Scott, I want to re-explain what a writ of certiorari is. So those of you who have been here for a really long time, and I know, Scott, you have been, remember that we talked about this not all that long ago in multiple formats, but we've also talked about how cases get to the Supreme Court from both the federal side of our court system and the state side of our court system, all of which meet at the top of the pyramid at SCOTUS. So the way in which an appeal lands at SCOTUS is through something called a writ of certiorari. And essentially what that is it's a brief that is filed that requests the Supreme Court to review the case. The Supreme Court is not required to review anything. How a case gets to the Supreme Court is dependent on whether or not it accepts the writ of certiorari, okay? So essentially it's a request for appeal. And in this particular instance, there was also an opposition to the writ of certiorari that was filed by Trump's team. And, we'll have to see what happens next. Now, because it is entirely optional, nobody really knows what the Supreme Court is going to do here. And I have to remind everybody who's sort of been panicking that if the Supreme Court rules that Trump has presidential immunity, that means that every president's going to have presidential immunity. It means that Biden could stay in power forever, or, grant power to resign, have Kamala Harris fill the seat, and she could stay in power forever, which I know is the white supremacist far-right GOP's worst nightmare. So I don't think that it's going to happen. I really don't think that there is a likelihood here that the Supreme Court is going to grant Trump presidential immunity. Again, I have to remind you, great legal minds differ. There are a number of commentators out there who think I'm wrong about this, or who have their own opinions about how this is going to go. I personally think that because of the precedent that it would set, it's very unlikely that they're going to grant him immunity. So, again, we're going to see how this plays out in the early part of 2024. But I don't want anybody to be under the impression that it means that we're done with this, because we're not. And a reminder, Judge Chutkan ruled that he had no presidential immunity. The DC Circuit, which is it's not extremely liberal. It's generally viewed to be a feeder court to the Supreme Court and one of the most careful circuit courts of appeals in the country. They handle an enormous number of very significant high-profile cases involving presidential immunity issues, Congress, anything having to do with the government generally lands in front of that circuit. So I'm not worried that the DC Circuit is going to overturn Judge Chutkan. It's just very unlikely. So we'll have to see what happens there. Okay. Somebody this morning was under the impression that Trump had been found guilty on all counts in the New York fraud case. And so I just have to remind everybody that that is not correct. Judge Engoron ruled that Trump was guilty of fraud, and the trial that we had was on the remaining counts, which included insurance fraud and fraudulent documents counts. And we are not done with that case yet. They have closed evidence in that case. Everybody's put on their case, but the oral arguments on that case, again, are also scheduled for the same week as this DC Circuit Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeals oral argument. So that will be heard on the 11th of January. We have an awful lot coming up in the first 2 weeks. Reminder, E. Jean Carroll's second case goes to trial on the 16th. So that second week in January is going to be like jam-packed. And, while I'm very optimistic, and rightly so, that Engoron is going to essentially rule that there's no, first of all, I think we're going to get like $100 million or more judgment against Donald Trump in that case. But also, I don't think there's any chance he's going to be found not guilty on the remaining counts. Judge Engoron, what the confusion here may lie in the fact that, as we discussed in last week's broadcasts, there was a directed verdict motion filed by Trump's team, which is a very standard motion that is filed at the end of a trial, which essentially is an attempt by a defendant to get the judge to say, no, you didn't, the prosecution didn't make out a case. And that was denied. But that doesn't mean that there's actually been a verdict entered against him by the judge. All right. So that's coming up as well. And it's going to be a very interesting first few weeks in January. Okay. Alexei Navalny has been found. I just want everybody to, again, there's a lot of news that seems to be like slipping under the radar screen while we've been kind of like, in the middle of this holiday window of disengagement, which is fine. Alexei Navalny has been found at a penal colony above the Arctic Circle. And just this morning, issued a statement through his attorneys. So he's alive. He's fine. He actually is cracking jokes about being in the Arctic tundra and having no sunlight. But obviously, the fact that he's still alive is good. I have to remind everybody, Putin is also up for re-election soon. He's going to be completely unopposed, but there will be a straw man candidate put up. He's going to win. But the point is that it's very good news that Alexei Navalny is alive and is also, by the way, continuing to be a real force for democracy inside of Russia, notwithstanding the fact that he's actually like in a penal colony. So his letter may have been published in the New York Times. The last reporting I saw on this was that it came out through his attorneys. So it's great that it's in the New York Times. If it's there, I did read it. It's very funny. It's amazing with the sense of humor this guy manages to maintain after being poisoned twice and sentenced to 19 years of hard labor. But I'm glad he's still alive. So there we are. All right. Okay. I have to address, there was kind of a funky question at the top of the question feed about something that someone overheard at a holiday party in DC. And I have to remind everybody, many of you remember that I went to law school in Washington, DC, and I lived in DC for 9 years. And there's nothing that people like to do more than, kind of hang out at holiday parties in DC and speculate about what's going to happen in a presidential election. So I don't know the total context of this, but essentially it was a rumor. I just have to tell you all, I think there's absolutely no weight to this. So I don't know who the person was who was talking. I don't know the context in which this conversation came up, if it was, somebody speculating or whatever it was. But essentially the question was to the effect that somebody had overheard something saying that Ron Klain was engineering a scheme by which Biden would step aside at the Democratic National Convention. Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer would be the actual candidate for the 2024 election. And, this was all underway. Okay, so I just have to point something out to you all. And, without giving away the farm here, you all know we're running this program, Mobilized 2024. I put up the banner, but that's not the reason why I'm mentioning it. The reason why I'm mentioning it is because one of the things that this program has allowed me to do is I'm in touch with people who are working at the Biden Victory Fund. Okay. Some of whom are friends of mine, people who I've interviewed in the past, really accomplished campaigners who are doing incredible work in 2024. And I'm just going to say one thing. This rumor is baseless. And I don't think anybody should be giving anything that they hear that is like a rumor of that type any kind of credence whatsoever. Biden is not stepping down. And, I want everybody to just be very, very clear on all of this, that, nobody should be running around, making comments about this as a real possibility. All right. I always have to shut things down very quickly, but, I'll eat my hat if something like this actually happens. Gavin Newsom has said he's not running in 2024. He's been saying it for a year. Gretchen Whitmer is doing incredible things in Michigan, and she doesn't want to be anything other than governor. So I don't know where the speculation came from. I suppose that people hear things and they want to ask about it, and I get that. But, this is so outlandish, not to mention that Ron Klain is no longer the White House chief of staff. The role that he's playing in relation to that, he's sort of like a surrogate, I suppose, for the campaign. But nobody would be putting in this kind of effort only to dump the whole thing to the side at the convention. It's just bizarre. Okay. So I just want everybody to not give that any weight. And I have to remind people that one of the things that's really critically important in 2024 is that we don't repeat things that we see on social media or that we might overhear people talking about without making sure that they are fact checked, that there is, a basis for them. Yeah, I know. Thank you, Lisa Gale. But yes, I know Gretchen Whitmer has also announced that she's not running in 2024. So, nobody should be thinking that there's any possibility that it's going to be a nominee other than Biden. Okay. And, for those of you who are on the feed who are talking about the Biden's too old situation that you're hearing from some friends, I want people to just understand that, that is the talking point, that is the only talking point that the far right has. And Donald Trump is 4 or 5 years younger, only in obvious mental decline. Did you not see his Truth Social posts over Christmas? Holy crap. Oh my God. There's really not any basis for anyone to be giving that any weight. And I want people to just understand that this is where we are. We've all got to get to work. We've got to make sure that we do everything that we can up and down the ballot to get our candidates elected. I'm going to remind everybody, do not discount your local elections. We're continuing to do, getting ready for this mobilized program, by the way. Like, one of the things that I did is I recorded the interview for that program with Malcolm Kenyata, who I think is the next to the last week. But I recorded that interview on Friday. He and I had like this incredible hour-long chat. I love Malcolm. And we had a lot of discussions about the importance of local elections and statewide elections right now, not just school board elections, which we also have Travis Akers on because he's running for school board. But we had a long conversation about how so many of us still don't understand the way that some of these statewide offices can have an impact. So like Malcolm right now, after his US Senate run from Pennsylvania in 2022, he's now running for the Auditor General of the state of Pennsylvania, which is a statewide office. It's the fourth most powerful office in the state of Pennsylvania. And the Auditor General is the person who determines whether or not there's been election fraud. I bet you would never guess that by like hearing the title Auditor General in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But like, that's an incredibly important role. And one of the reasons why he's running for it is because the guy who has been holding the seat prior to him, who's a Republican, has said that like he wouldn't challenge claims of election fraud by Republicans. Like, he wouldn't investigate things. Like, he wouldn't investigate like school related issues in terms of school boards and what they were doing. So I really want, bye. I really want people to just be critically aware rather of the role of all of the statewide offices that people are going to be involved in, all right? Like, that people are running for. And this is a really good moment for people to just really start to educate yourself about what's happening for like locally where you live, statewide, locally, even in your school district. And making sure that you're very consciously aware of who's running for what office and what they stand for, because the work that we're going to have to do, going forward is going to be the work of, yes, that person was not saying Biden was a rambling idiot, just for the comments. That person was saying that Trump is a rambling idiot. Okay. Context matters. I know sometimes the feed doesn't keep up with my commentary directly. All right. So I just want people to be very, very mindful of what you're looking at for 2024. All right. And do it locally, do it on a statewide basis. Yes, do it for national elections for the House and the Senate, also for the presidency, of course. But, one of the things that's really tricky about where we find ourselves is that a lot of people only want to talk about the presidential election right now, when in fact, the elections that are going to matter most to you where you live, like, yes, of course, the presidential matters, please don't mistake me, but like the policies that are being made where you live, particularly if you live in a state that has a Republican legislature, those local elections are going to matter a heck of a lot going forward, because that's where abortion rights, gun control issues, voting rights, other issues related to civil rights, issues related to trans health care, issues related to, like reproductive health, all these sorts of things are being done at the local level. So it's really important to get involved in how things are going to play out for you locally where you live. All right. Okay, I am going to say, I'm going to talk a little bit about just 2024 generally in just a minute, but I want to say one other thing. For those of you who are on the Patreon feed, and I know that a lot of our commentators are, and I'm just going to, put this up. You can go become a paid subscriber at Resistance Live and ask questions over there. If I have not gotten to your question on the question feed today, because there were a bunch of questions where I was just like, this is an easy fact check. I have responded to your comments on the question feed like I always do. So if you didn't get your question answered live on the broadcast and you are a Patreon subscriber, because that's how you ask questions in advance of the broadcast for 2 hours, go back and check the feed and see whether or not I've replied there. All right. Because there were some questions this morning that were just really like a simple yes or no answer. And, the other thing that I'll just say here is that I want to encourage people, particularly if you have questions that are like, I overheard this weird thing, or my neighbor said this strange thing that doesn't sound like it makes sense to me. Like, please Google that. Right? Like, I think you will find very quickly that some of these stranger talking points, like Kamala Harris isn't popular, you can find, like an answer to by like actually Googling what's happening on Kamala Harris's college tour. Holy crap. I mean, like, holy crap. This idea that Kamala Harris isn't popular, particularly with Gen Z, is like a non-starter. Okay. So yeah, let's remember that, we've got to actually really do our own work. Also, that's part of being media literate. And, if I haven't answered something on the here on the broadcast and you're on the Patreon feed, you can go check it out there, because I do respond to things in writing when I don't have time to cover them for the broadcast. So it's good time for a good reminder there. So, all right. This is also a very good point just in the question feed this morning. Primaries start next week. And, don't forget also that, there are some strange folks running in the Democratic primary in some of these states. So I want everybody to just be mindful that, we have third party contenders to deal with. We've also got people running in against Biden in some locations. So let's just be mindful of voting in the primary as well as the general. That's a very good point. I appreciate that. So I'm just going to say this. I think, North Carolina's got a lot of work to do. Thank you for commenting on this, Scarlett. We know that North Carolina has a very gerrymandered map right now that's being challenged in court, but also North Carolina governor is really important. Task forces related to North Carolina elections are going to be really critical. Again, your state level elections are really important. Yes, I'm a huge fan of Gloria Johnson in Tennessee. She's running for the U.S. Senate. There's a lot of races that are going to be very, very critical coming up. And, we'll talk more about that in 2024. All right. So, we are doing this program that I've now mentioned 3 times on the broadcast. Sorry, this whole thing is not just an advertisement, I promise. But, we are running Mobilize 2024 because we want people to get involved and to learn to mobilize as leaders where you live in 2024. And if you haven't gotten in on that, I really encourage you to do that. We're also granting scholarships. We're filtering through scholarship applications if you've applied. So please know that we'll get back to you if you have applied for a scholarship. We're also doing partial payments for people who can't afford the whole program. So there's a lot of ways to get access to it. If it is not within your bandwidth, there are payment plans for those of you who can swing it, but want to pay over time. I do really want to encourage people to get involved in that if you have not yet done so. Because it's going to be a program that is very robust and it runs right up until Super Tuesday. All right. But I'm going to say a couple of things here about 2024 just generally, because, that's one thing we can do on this week, right? We're getting ready for the next year. I'm doing an enormous amount of planning for 2024 generally on a number of fronts, like personal, professional, and also political, because for many of us, and I have to wave at my private coaching clients here who are organizing literally their entire lives about where they're going to be to mobilize in states like Minnesota and in states like Wisconsin and in states like Michigan, right? People are actually organizing their annual calendars and trips around where they're going to be doing mobilization work for the 2024 election, which is awesome. I just want to say a couple of things about all of this though, because I want to seed some things for you guys heading into the election that I think are going to be critically important. The first is about disinformation, because we've already had some conversations here on the feed over the last couple of weeks about the degree of disinformation that is in play right now. Now that Threads has opened up to Europe and Russia, we've seen an influx of bots and trolls again. I'm still seeing some followers on this broadcast engage with people that I know from first glance are not legitimate accounts. And so I just want to, again, put out a plea to all of you to remember that when you engage with something, the algorithm amplifies it, okay? If you are going to engage with something that sounds like it's supposed to be outrageous and you don't know who the account is, and even if you do, I want to encourage you to just block, right? My one exception to this is that every once in a while, when there was a horrible far-right Republican congressperson saying something stupid and completely false, I will engage in it in a funny sort of way, okay? But it's only when it's an account that I know is legit. And it's only I would say probably once a month right now that I do something like that, where there's a pylon of trolling. To me, I want people to be very thoughtful about what you are doing on social media as you head into 2024, okay? Batting back at people, I've seen people say, oh, I block, but not after I've set somebody's hair on fire. Setting somebody's hair on fire means that other people are going to see that post, all right? And I know that sometimes it feels really good to dunk on people on the far right. I'm just going to encourage you to not do that, because one of the things that these accounts rely on is your engagement, because the algorithm doesn't care if your engagement is negative or positive, right? The algorithm doesn't care if you're reposting it with like, a GIF or a nasty emoji, right? The algorithm sees your engagement with it. And I just want everyone to be very, very, very thoughtful about what it is that you are doing on social media as we head into 2024, because we've had a taste of it in the last 2 weeks, and it's going to get a heck of a lot worse. Like, if you don't have your own strategies here to just block and move on, we're going to be in real trouble. All right. I'm also just going to point out that, the first week of the program, we are talking to Anat Shankar-Osorio. I want to mention to everyone that there is a very important op-ed this morning in the New York Times that Anat has co-authored with, I think, Norm Eisen and one other person, about the fact that the current accurate polling, and we've talked a lot about polling on this broadcast in the last couple of weeks, shows that if Trump is convicted of a crime, an enormous block of voters are going to vote for Biden instead. Okay. So one of the things that we need to be very mindful of here is not amplifying bad polling, even to dunk on it, like much in the same way that you don't want to amplify trolling and bots and all that sort of stuff. Understand what the polls say. Okay. Yes, there is something to be said about like combating the disinformation of the amplification of a poll. But if it's like a crap poll run by a Republican pollster, you're probably better off ignoring it and allowing like the more senior media sources like Molly Jong-Fast and others who will do their role of calling out that the poll is garbage. Again, I want to just remind people, though, that like your engagement equals amplification. Okay. So think very carefully about what you're going to engage with, because if you engage with it, you will amplify it. All right. Just again, this is going to be a really critical key strategy for all of 2024. But I do also want to tell everybody to go read this piece. All right. Because it will be, it's really important for us to remember that, none of this is done. All right. And yes, we have an enormous amount of work to do, but there's a lot of dominoes that could fall in the interim between now and next November. And it's important to keep your chin up, to keep the faith, to keep engaging, to keep doing the work of getting out the vote, to make sure that you are mobilizing your friends and neighbors where you live. Like, don't get down. All right. And I think that this particular piece is a really good piece for people to pay attention to. And please go read it, go read it, because it's going to inform you about what the stats are currently showing about what happens if Trump is convicted. And I got to say this, I do think that there is a very strong likelihood that he will be convicted of a crime before we get to next November. And I'm not alone in that. Like lots of people, like, for instance, the former Solicitor General under Obama, the famous Neil Katyal, happens to agree with me on this. So I do, yes, it's in the New York Times, Lisa. I do want people to, make sure that you are finding positive engagement and things to keep your spirits up while you're moving forward. Okay, speaking of Anat Shankar-Osorio, the other thing that I just want to mention here is that one of the key strategies that we have to engage in as we head into 2024 is focusing on a future vision that is a positive one. Okay. So one of the things that the stats show about getting out the vote is that you have to find a uniform way of meeting people where they are on the basis of values, not on the basis of party, but on the basis of values, right? What are the things that we value as Americans? What are the things that we all want? Well, we all want access to education for our kids. We all want everybody to have health care, right? We want everybody to be in a position where like their rights are protected and you don't have the government deciding what your doctor should do, right? There are some very common themes for values that are really significant. But I just have to remind people also, because I think this is really, really critical. Voting against is one thing, but we actually need to give people something to vote for. And so the vision of what the Democrats could do in a second Biden term is going to become ever more important in our messaging for 2024. So one of the things that I want people to think about is like the potential codification of Roe versus Wade. If we hold the Senate, take the House, and Biden is the president. Okay. I want people to be talking about the fact that we could have an assault weapons ban in a second Biden term if we take back the House. I want people to be talking about the fact that, the protection of trans rights nationwide hangs in the balance, right? And that is a vision of something that, like we can talk about, right? That people should be able to make their own medical decisions about what they do with their own bodies, right? That we want, yes, this is a very fair point, Lisa. We want people who are really, really rich to pay their fair share, so that we can protect Social Security and Medicare, so that we can advance social programs that benefit everyone, so we can have high-speed rail. I mean, my goodness, like I'm so into what Secretary Pete is doing right now. Like all these things that we want, as a society for one another are possible, right? Universal free lunch, paid childcare, right? Paid family leave by the government. Like, we're one of the only countries at this point in the Western world that do not have paid family leave from the government. I mean, like, yes, we have this mandatory law that says you get 12 weeks of family leave if you need it and your employer has to pay for it. But I'm talking about like government funded family leave for like a year, like Canada, right? Like, these are all things that we could do if we have the House and we have the Senate and we have the presidency. And so and protect the planet. Thank you very much. Yes, like all the things that we need to do to reverse climate change, all of these things are at stake. All right. And so I just really want people to be engaged in the Vision Project. All right. And, you know, you all have heard me say this before, but one of the things that I think that trauma and the Trump era has done is it's really narrowed our vision down to like the thing of like the panic and the threat, as opposed to reminding ourselves and one another that there are much bigger things that could be done to make the world a better place. And that, like, you know, the Democrats stand for that, and progressive candidates in particular. And that, you know, like when people are voting for Democrats or voting for a candidate that shares those values, because, right, like, don't forget, you got to make that connection. That creates possibility for a better country, right? For a better society. All right. So I just, you know, again, we're going to talk a lot more about this in 2024, but this is a good week for folks to be thinking about what we need to be doing and ramping up for 2024. And I'm also just going to say one other thing here. For our Patreon members, we have our last Sunday progressive coffee hour of the year coming up on New Year's Eve. We're also going to do a 2023 roundup, because one of the things that I want people to do as well right now, and I've done this personal thing. I mentioned this on Threads the other day, because 2023 was a horrible year for me. Many of you who follow me, you know, parasocial relationship and all of that, but you've gotten a few hints of the fact that like 2023 has been a really brutal year for me personally. I just want folks to know that one of the things that really combats your sense of doom and gloom about things is looking back on, what has actually been accomplished. All right. And we've had a lot of wins this year. I know there are people who like don't feel that way, but we're going to talk about this on the last 2023 Progressives Coffee Hour for our Patreon subscribers on Sunday. So that's coming up. If you want to join us, patreon.com/resistance live. Subscription started as little as $2 a month. But you know, we've got to be really engaged in the good. All right. Not just pushing back against Trump and fascism, which is critically important, but we've also got to be really engaged in the good. And so one of the ways that we've got to do that is by making sure that we are focusing on the wins that we have at this point already. This person, bye. I'm just going to say something here. All right. Like, this is the other thing. We have a prime example of what I was just talking about in the comments. All right. Somebody drops into the comments here on the chat and says, I'm sorry, it's all over. Like, there's no way that Biden's going to win. And I'm not engaging any further because, like, I don't really think there's any chance of that. That person is a troll. That's not somebody that you're going to convince, right? That's not somebody who is actually here on the broadcast or operating on social media in good faith, right? That's not what's happening. And yet, here we are in the comments, everybody's saying like, Richard, it's not over and done with yet. Richard, you should do this. You should do that. That person's a troll. That's why I just blocked them. Okay. So like, we've just had a prime example of what people need to think through when they're doing things here. All right. Just please, again, you got to use your judgment. Okay. Do not engage with people who are doomsaying, right? That person was here to seed discord, and we just watched it happen like live in the chat. Right? This is a prime example. Thank you, Richard, for giving me an example to point to of what literally just went down here. This is exactly what we need to avoid in 2024. All right. So going forward, let me just say this as well. We're going to have to count our victories, and we're going to have to count them as we move through 2024. All right. We're going to have to count the victories in primaries. We're going to have to count the victories at the local and state level, because some of these elections are happening before November. We're going to have to count the wins of what we are able to accomplish. And one of the things I just want to encourage everybody to be able to do here going forward as we head into 2024 as well is keep track. Like, if you've door knocked 100 doors on a Sunday, I want you to like take yourself out for hot chocolate or something, right? Like I want you to stay focused on the good and the wins. If you have managed to make sure that a school board candidate who is like a Moms for Liberty candidate doesn't get seated on that school board, that's a huge win, right? So this is just a strategy, you know, again, like kind of mental health and engagement strategy that I just want people to be thinking about. And I'm going to share a lot more of this stuff going forward. And also, of course, in our program, if should you care to join it. And I just want, I want someone to be, I want someone. I am like watching you guys filter through these comments still on Richard. I want all of you to be very, very mindful about your mindset. All right. Because, you know, you all know, like I do executive coaching in addition to all the work that I do for political consulting and coaching and all that other sort of stuff. And I work with candidates. And, you know, one of the things that continues to come up, you know, not just with my professional, like, executive coaching clients, but honestly with like the people I'm working with politically right now, is this issue of like, how do we keep our heads above water? And one of the ways you keep your heads above water is by continuing to engage, by building great community, and also by celebrating wins. So critically important, critically important. All right. That's it for today, my friends. I'm going to be here this week. You know, I signaled last week that I might take a day off to surprise my kids, but I did that on Christmas Eve. I actually managed to execute on my surprise. I took them to Universal Studios Hollywood. We spent the day there. It was awesome. We had so much fun. So I'm planning on being here all week right now, unless there's like an extremely slow news day, in which case I might give myself a day off. I'm super grateful for you guys. I'm really glad, especially for our Patreon subscribers. You can head on over there if you would care to join us for Sunday Coffee Hour, like I mentioned. That is at patreon.com/resistance-live. You can check that out. And also, I'm going to remind everybody once again, we are, this program, by the way, is filling really fast, but our Mobilized 2024 program, you've got 2 weeks from tomorrow to register for that because it starts 2 weeks from Thursday. So I would suggest getting in now. We are over 30 registrants right now. We've had more, like we're substantially more than that with the scholarships added in. So if you're interested in joining us, please head on over to that link right here, GaiaLeadershipProject.com/mobilize, and get in, because I'm looking forward to spending 8 weeks with a whole bunch of you starting January 11th. All right. That's it for today, my friends. Thank you all for being here. Enjoy your week between Christmas and New Year's. I will be here tomorrow. And yeah, I would just encourage everybody to take some time this week and think about what your engagement is going to look like for 2024. Do some planning if you haven't done it already. All right, my friends, much love. I will catch you all here tomorrow. Thanks for being here. Ciao.